really working on bypassing that and getting beyond that on a bigger social, cultural construct. And I think that we're at a pivotal point, here. It's 2019, and I have great hope for that because, like, my son has a transgender child that he grew up with since kindergarten, and at 5th grade that child made the transition, and the mother said, well, I just didn't know if you knew. And I was like, that's great. I've just been waiting for that to happen. How are you being received? Or is everything okay? Like, is there any bullying going on? How can we help? And the mother was really shocked that I was just waiting. I said, well, I told my son that that was a strong possibility, and that if that happened, we would just support in whatever way. And so I checked in with my son. I said, how's it going? Is everything okay? And he said, no, nobody's picking on him at all, and it's totally fine. He just goes by this, already changed the, gender pronoun. I was so proud of him. And he said, it's fine, everything's fine. And I thought, we have hope for the future. If children can be taught to move beyond that dualistic thinking, we also, as adults, have to be able to move beyond that dualistic thinking. And so I think Tara practice is very pivotal for actually working with that kind of realization and that energy. So, also she's green. So why is she green? Okay. So she's this beautiful, sometimes you see this like voluptuous woman, and she's always said to be like sort of a 16-year-old is always considered the best Dakini sort of version. She's clad in jewels. She's extremely attractive. And yeah, her skin is green. So it's like, okay, well, why is her skin green? And this is because she is the spiritual consort to Amoghasiddha. So, and Amoghasiddha and Tara are connected to the 5 Buddha families with the element of air, and so, or moon, and that is associated with green. And so we also see that she got her name from Amoghasiddha, and so he's green, and because he's green, she's green, okay? So, and that's through the connection of the 5 Buddha families. And then also she's considered to have, her realm is like a forest. She's like a forest-dwelling goddess. And so you can see different stories of her particular palace being comprised of gems and like lush and really full with flowers, and just sort of like that whole ripeness kind of is associated with her. And you can also see some stories of her where she's like covered in leaves. And I think she has a relationship, I'd have to double check this with the Khenpos, but there is a particular Dakini practice and mantra that we use in healing mantras, which is the green leaf Dakini. And this is a powerful mantra Dakini practice that we do when there are highly contagious diseases going on. We'll use this mantra to sort of stop contagions. So like, it could be anything like for example, I did this practice this winter when that viral flu-y kind of postnasal upper respiratory endless flu drip thing was happening, and I was seeing like 2 or 3 patients a week with this. I did that mantra as a protective against that, and I never got sick. So sometimes I think there's an association with there, but I would have to double check that with the Khenpos. But that's also a practice that is commonly done within the Trangu daily prayers as well, like in the ones that the monks have in their book. There's just, this prayer is said every day, pretty commonly, and it's a really short mantra as well. So she's green because she's very much related to the growth cycle and nature, and so you see that she's always like surrounded by like lots of different wild beasts, like she can really tame against poisonous snakes and these kinds of things. So you see her sort of surrounded sometimes with lots of different types of animals. She's kind of like the Snow White of Tibetan Buddhism. So in her right hand, she always holds, and sometimes you'll see it as a different color, but it should be a blue utapel, or a blue lotus, which is also an extremely important healing plant in Tibetan medicine. And so this is always held at her right hand. You can see it down in here. And she is holding this in the mudra of generosity. And this is the same mudra, or the mudra of giving, as the medicine Buddha. So she's literally holding this blue lotus. And the lotus has a lot of representation within Buddhism. Of course, we talk about how, you know, it arises from the muck, it comes from the depths of the muddy, ugly water, that it can transcend the darkness of Marikpa, of ignorance. And so in this sense, she's offering this generosity of protecting one from the fear of ignorance, and that sort of root cause of all of the root poisons. And the lotus itself also represents being unstained by samsara. So even though it can be grown within the dirtiest, most polluted water, it still remains quite unstained in itself and pure. And that means that, like, in the depth of ourselves, when we move beyond our dualistic thinking, we start to see the unstained nature of our own mind. We start to realize our own Buddha nature inherent within. All of us are already enlightened, we just forgot. We just cover it up. Those are the heaps, those are the piles of all of our natural defaults going into the three root poisons and creating all of the skandhas and obscurations that we love to live in. So the lotus actually represents sort of moving beyond that, and moving beyond this idea of living in a stained world to the ultimate truth and the ultimate reality, which is Buddha nature. So early Buddhist Pali texts really go into a lot of detail about the lotus itself. And it talks about how, that water will just naturally run off of a lotus. It doesn't like stay. There's a text called the Dhammadapata, I can never say this word, which talks about this unstained nature. And it says, I'm going to read it to you. It says, "As upon a heap of rubbish thrown out by the highway may grow a lotus delightful and of pure scent, so among defiled beings, among the blind, unawakened beings, the discipline of the fully and perfectly awakened one shines with wisdom." Meaning that that Buddha nature, that unstained nature that grows from the depths of rubbish, is already there, and it's among all of us. So it's already present, it's omnipresent. So in early days, the lotus would actually represent the Buddha. Like, you would not see images of the Buddha in early Buddhism. It would be feet or it would be lotuses. There wasn't actually an image of his face. It was kind of considered disrespectful. Similarly to how in Islam there's no images of Allah. It's kind of the same principle. And then later on that did change, but in early Buddhism, you'll see either footprints or lotus petals. And that's because it represented that awakened wisdom, that pristine, unstained, awakened Buddha nature that's within us all. So that's her holding, this generous giving mudra. So this is really kind of on the relative truth, on the relative level of, I'm afraid now, I'm angry now, I'm sad now, I'm, stuck now, what can you offer me? And she's like, I'm coming, I'm coming to help you. So that's this sort of generous offering with the mudra of generosity. And then in her other hand, right at her sort of heart, she's got the ultimate truth happening, which is the ultimate level of enlightenment or reality. And this is through teaching. So this is the teaching mudra that she has here, where she's saying, okay, here we go. I'm going to give you the truth. It's coming. So, sorry, I have such a tiny. So this is because through her teachings, she's actually offering you the ability to save your own self from your own fears. Because it's not necessarily about her swiftly coming, and she will swiftly come. She absolutely will. But it's also about learning how to save oneself from your own fears, which are swiftly arriving over and over again. And you do that through the teachings. So that's any teachings that the Buddha gave, or any yidam or deity gives, because those are also on the ultimate reality level of full awakened enlightenment. So we have relative truth and we have ultimate truth. And it's really interesting because you'll see that also. You've heard me talk when I've given teachings on Medicine Buddha about, the sort of relative truth of suffering and sickness and illness and birth and old age and sickness and death. And then you've got the ultimate truth of the nectar, of the healing nectar in the bowl with the Medicine Buddha. So it's the same thing, only it's just a different way of looking at it. Okay? So those are some of the symbolic gestures of her. I'm trying to think of what else I want to tell you. Yeah. So did anyone have any curiosity why I said, you have to be vegetarian this morning? Did you all know about that? Yeah? Okay. You were, no? Okay. So there are different, there are basically 4 classes of Tantra within Vajrayana, which is, we have the Kriya Tantra, which is what Green Tara comes from. And this is all about external practices. So any kind of external practice is generally related to the Kriya Tantra. And then there's I'll just tell you the 4 and then I'll explain the Kriya a little bit better. And then there's Chairya Tantra, which is external and internal practices, which are of equal measure. And then you have the Yoga Tantra, which is all internal practices. And then you have I can never say this, Anartatarya Yoga Tantra, which is special, sort of secretive internal practices, things like the Kala Chakra. So Kriya Tantra has a huge emphasis on ritual and cleanliness. So if you're going through a sadhana and you're talking about making all the different offerings, and you have, the 7 different offerings, you have water for bathing, and ritual cleansing of the deity, and then you offer flowers, and you offer incense, and perfume, and food, and you're doing and music, and you're doing these things to sort of help sensory function. These are like basic offerings, but it's said that you really need to make these offerings with purity and cleanliness. And so for that reason, there's ritual washing involved within the Kriya Tantra, and making external purifications of oneself in different parts of the body with different mudras. And I'll leave those explanations for the Khenpos because they're better coming from them. They're much more highly educated about this particular subject. I have very limited knowledge on this. But within the Kriya Tantra, there's also specific ways that one can gain samadhi through shamatha, which is why I'm always teaching shamatha practice, because people often think that shamatha is just like, it's like a preliminary, like it's just like a basic, you just learn how to sit and rest your mind in a state of like seatedness. It's like, well, okay, yeah, but you can't do any higher tantric practice unless you know how to place your mind. So it's kind of critical and very important and often overlooked within Western Kriya Tantra tradition, there's a very specific way that learning how to place one's mind through shamatha creates a particular type of samadhi. And it's a stillness and a state of mind that's not associated with visualizations. There's also the sound of the mantra, and you can hear the mantra through your body without using the sensory organ. So sometimes when I'm prescribing mantra therapy to people, I'll tell them do it out loud, do it quietly. There's different reasons that we would prescribe that, but within this tradition, the Kriya Yogic tradition, it's because you want to be able to increase the internal sound, not necessarily through the sense organ. And so then you're listening with the heart, and it's resonating through the heart in a specific way. So actually, tam, which is the root for tar,